On today's show, national title. Also, we have the coaching carousel, which has taken over the country. I have some great thoughts on that. And then Kyle would like to dive into some year-end summaries as well as look into next year. So without further ado, we got to start the show. Welcome to episode of Sitting Courtside. Tonight it's Friday, guys. Calm down. It's April 12th, not the 13th, thank God. And Kyle, stop me if you've heard this before, but the Uconn Huskies are your national champions.
Yeah, we definitely have. We've definitely heard that about 6 times in the last 25 years, to be exact.
Yes,
So,
you're correct.
yes, as Jordan mentioned off the top, we have a loaded podcast today. Obviously, it's the last podcast of the season. We'll talk about that more later, but we got to get into it. It was an incredible college basketball season. A little predictable. I mean, the team that won last year did win, but
yes, it was.
But first off, right off the bat, we got to congratulate our winner of our Sitting Courtside bracket, Drake Whaley. He is his first season in our podcast bracket challenge. He won. He had the title game picked perfectly. UConn versus Purdue. He had UConn winning. He actually won 70 points ahead of the next best entry. And he's also reached out to me on Twitter. So congratulations, Drake. You'll be getting your prize pack in the mail. So congratulations, Drake, on winning our fourth or fifth? Is this the fifth or the fourth? Fourth year. But I know you guys listen to this want to know some other notable finishes. We've mentioned a lot of different names on this podcast that you guys all know. Out of all of our friends, family, significant others, Maggie, my wife, finished the best out of all of us with 8th. And then, of course, Jordan's wife, Marie, finished 11th with second best. So, of course, that's how we all plan this to go.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly how it's supposed to go. Wives always do better than us.
Yep. So we had, I think, a total of 5 family members in our bracket challenge. They all finished better than me and Jordan. Me and Jordan finished 19th and 23rd.
Yeah.
While my sister Crystal, brother-in-law Chris, and father-in-law Don all finished above us. So we didn't show out very well on this one.
I'm going to blame the tournament. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I think this is me going on a limb right now. Me and you, we were hoping for an A to A minus tournament. Of course, everyone wants A plus. I think we got like a C out of the tournament this year.
Yeah. C is great and light. Like that's a 70 right there.
So. Yeah. So I blame the tournament. I'm just gonna say it. I blame the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to give one last shout out to Tyler Myers. Tyler, I do not know you, but you finished 37th out of 37 teams in our bracket challenge, 420 points, and only got one Elite 8 team right. Pretty impressive, honestly. It's pretty impressive because the only one you got right was Purdue, and almost everyone got that one right. So congrats, Tyler Myers, on finishing the Brock Purdy event.
You gave it the real college try. No one can hate you for that. I am curious, though, again, how many points did you say he had?
420.
Buddy, you finished 20 points higher than my 5-year-old daughter. Who we went off of colors.
Yeah. That's awesome.
But hey, all right. It is what it is.
Well, we looked for everyone that joined this year to join again next year. Hopefully we'll get a bigger turnout next year, bigger prize packs for next year. But we got to keep moving on because, again, it is a loaded podcast. And probably the biggest announcement is season 3 of the Chase for the Belt. And I'll just let the guy on the other side of the microphone go ahead and take over for this one.
Guys, there was a lot of effort that went into designing this belt. I've literally only touched it one time, and that's when it came out of the box to physically get sent to the winner. It's a long endeavor. I did what I had to do. I'm shocked that I won. But you know what? I'm not giving it back ever again. So, Kyle, be happy with it. You'll never see it again.
Yes, I kept it just so I could bring it up on the camera for the podcast, but it will be sent to you, and you'll have it very shortly here. And just for those keeping track, the final count was I was 258, 236, and 4 at 52.21%. Jordan was 212, 186, and 6 at 53.22%. So if you're doing your math, 1.01% different is how Jordan won this season.
And quite frankly, we're being honest, I think Saturday was a killer for you.
It did. It crushed me. No, it did not.
I think, though, again, the bigger story needs to be between the two of us. I'm going to say probably close to 2,500 plays from football to the end of basketball. And
Yeah.
we finished, I think, collectively in the 54, 55%. I know your basketball record was
Mhm.
insane.
Yep.
Impressive. If you guys aren't listening to the show, this is your first time listening, you missed out on a lot of dollars and cents.
Mhm.
Come back next year. You'll be happy you did.
Yeah, completely agree. And what really killed me at the end of the season, honestly, and I should just put this down on a sticky note, is I started involving once we could do more than 10 picks a week.
Yeah.
I started involving other sports. I have my record for just college basketball, including women's. I went 523, 437, and 4 for a 54.51% win percentage. If I just would have stayed with the sports that I
Yeah.
know, instead I got a little greedy and went elsewhere.
Well, you learned your lesson. You learned your lesson.
Well, congrats, though. I think that's now 3 years into the belt,
Yep.
and each one of us, Dylan, me, and you all have one. So next
Yes.
year will be a big old
Who's the real champ
prize. So,
next year?
yeah. All right, let's go ahead and recap what we all saw this past weekend. I don't really think we need to spend too much time on the Final Four,
Yeah.
but let's go ahead and start with any big takeaways from the Final Four. Final Four. I'll start with the Purdue game.
Mm.
Purdue beats North Carolina State 63-50, despite having 16 turnovers. But we watched this game together. They got the big man on NC State in foul trouble very
Yes.
early, very predictable, and it just was a very comfortable win for Purdue, despite their offense not looking together at all.
Yeah. Not to spoil, I guess, but I think that was the first game that I could tell that Purdue was starting to feel a little tired. I
Yep.
think you could tell that in the championship game. NC State, though, again, what we talked about last episode, it finally came to fruition with them. They were just not, they aren't the same class of
Yep.
Purdue. And then if we go to the other side,
Mm-hmm.
I actually think Alabama could have probably beat any team in the country not named Connecticut or Purdue.
Yeah.
Like it really was that way. I felt like even in that game, they were in it, they were hitting shots, but you just couldn't keep up with the fury of Uconn, and they just ran out for them.
It was incredible. They played offensively. You know they're not going to play good defense, but offensively played probably the best half you could play against UConn. They shot 70% from three in the first half, and they were down 6 going into halftime.
Yeah.
70%, 7 of 10 going
Mhm.
into halftime, and they were still down 6. It's absolutely crazy. As UConn did win that game 86-72, as you all know. So, any other takeaways from the Final Four? Should we just move on to what we all watched on Monday night?
Yep, let's go to the national title, sir.
All right, national title game. Obviously, you guys already know. UConn wins their second straight national title. More impressively, they won their 12th straight tournament game by double digits in the last 2 years. They imposed their will on Purdue in the second half. I mean, 75-60 really doesn't do it justice with just how much better they were than Purdue in that 2nd half. I have a few stats on Purdue I'd like to say, but go ahead and give your thoughts on the title game.
I have two things very quickly. I'm going to give Edius flowers. That man is an NBA player. I don't care what anyone says. Everyone's like, oh, he's just so much bigger. Klingon is a top 10 pick.
Mm-hmm.
He played against them. He did well. He outplayed him, quite frankly.
Definitely.
However, I could tell within about 90 seconds UConn was winning that game.
Yeah.
Because Purdue was doing nothing and Edie was doing everything. Like it was going to be impossible. You can't do that as against what might be maybe the most well-balanced team we have seen in probably 7 or 8 years in Connecticut. Like it was just instantaneous. You knew it was over. There was no way Edie could do it for 40 minutes.
Yeah. And my first point will go into my second point here is it was very clear from the start what the game plan was for UConn. They were going to single cover Edie as long as Klingon didn't get in foul trouble. He did a little bit, but not as early as Purdue needed it to happen. And they just completely shut down the guards. Like they just were like, we're not letting you guys score at all. We know we're bigger than you. Like literally in the first minute, Grant Hill and Raftery were already saying, man, the size difference of these guards is just incredible. And it was evident from the start, which gets me to my second point of I didn't know this stat. I had to look it up on my own because no one's really talked about it. If you go off of ESPN, the stat won't be correct. But if you watch the game, you know a jumper from Edie is just a hook. It's not an actual jumper. They went the last 22 minutes and 22 seconds without a single player on their team hitting a jump shot. Like everything was either a layup, a dunk, or an Edie jump hook or a free throw. Like literally, once they got it tied 30-30, Braden Smith's 3, that was the last time they hit a shot that wasn't like a next to the basket shot. So they completely shut down the supporting cast from Purdue. Lance Jones, the only guy that could try to be as physical as UConn's defense, got in foul trouble the entire game. Lawyer, I don't know why he decided on Monday that that was the game he was going to drive because it wasn't ever going to work.
Yeah.
But the supporting cast, absolutely terrible from Purdue. It was just so obvious that the game plan from UConn was just let Edie score as many points as he possibly can because you're not going to beat us with twos if you're your guys from three, the number one shooting team from the nation from
Yeah.
three isn't going to get shots up. They had shot 7 the entire game, and 3 of those were in junk time. So
Yeah. I mean, I think Grant Hill said it was like 17 minutes in the half. It's like they had attempted 1-3, I think, at
yep,
that point. Like it's a team that lived on threes. And I heard a couple other shows kind of reference this, and it kind of made sense after thinking about it. Purdue kind of made their living off of basically second chance shots because every jumper they shot that was a miss, Edie was getting the rebound 9 out of 10 times. That wasn't happening against Connecticut, which hence was why they were down. But also the length of the guards, if you're just like a casual fan, you really didn't notice it, but I instantly could tell whenever Braden Smith, every jumper he took in the first half, he looked like he was trying to do a Kobe Bryant fadeaway from the
yeah,
baseline from like 12 feet, but
definitely.
the guy's 20 feet from the basket. That is not your normal shot, sir.
Yeah,
It's because he had Spencer on him, who's 6'6".
yeah,
Like he just it didn't look right. The shooters looked uncomfortable. I remember early 9 minutes in, Gillis gets that's a fast break. Gillis gets to swing to the left corner. Under most circumstances, he's shooting the ball.
shoots it.
He
Yep.
pump faked because the guard was coming at him. I think it was who was I forget who it was, but I mean it's another tall guard that probably had 4 inches on him. Just
Yep.
they looked so uncomfortable out there. And I do think part of it was that they did not have the depth that UConn had. They kind of had to grind it out a bit more than UConn did to get to where they got, and it showed for sure in the second half.
Yeah. And you already brought up Gillis, but in the second half, they actually tried to get him 3 different threes at one in the second half. One of them, an air ball. Other one was blocked after a pump fake. And then the other one, he like went to shoot it and then just kind of forgot he was trying to shoot and just threw the ball away for a turnover. Like their
Yes.
team just was so disjointed anytime it wasn't just pass it straight in to Edie or have a pick and roll where the guy goes under and Smith tries to take a jump shot. Like it was just I mean, Hurley out coached the hell out
Yeah.
of Painter, and there's nothing much more that you could say than that.
I had actually forgotten about the air ball. I remember
Uh-huh.
that air ball and being like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, yeah.
That like I didn't even have words for it. I remember like looking at my wife, just like, what?
Uh,
Surely it got blocked. Like, what
yeah,
was that? Didn't even hit the net. Like,
yeah.
you're nowhere close.
And I know this will go pretty like nobody really cares about this, but Miles Colvin has played very few minutes all season for Purdue. He's a talented freshman, obviously the son of a former NBA player. Painter must have thought they needed some kind of athleticism out there. That's why they threw him out there. But he was awful. Like he was terrible. He committed a turnover, a foul, missed both of his shots, and constantly was beat on defense. He played the most minutes he's played. He tied for the second most minutes he played in any regular season game that wasn't against like a crap team at the beginning of the
Yeah.
season. I just didn't understand why. I get you need scoring, but he hasn't scored a point
Yeah.
since Utah State, and before that, it'd been like 3 games before that too. So.
Yeah. Well, it also probably doesn't help because you could clearly tell that man does not practice with those people, with
No.
those same guy. He looks so lost on offense.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So he would get the ball, he'd be like, wait, I got the ball.
Yeah. Now what am I supposed to do?
I will say something nice about Purdue. Kaufman Wren.
Yeah.
If he was just 3 inches taller, he would be amazing.
Yeah.
He was extremely physical, which I really enjoyed because he does have the frame for it. But one, he needs to put on some muscle, like or weight. I guess he is already kind of muscular. But two, I don't know, it's maybe just he's with literal like height freaks. He did look like he was more of like a small forward than like a power forward center. He, like I said,
Yeah.
he's had a couple inches on him. He would be an amazing player.
Yeah. I'm interested to see like his role next year. I think it'll be a lot bigger and it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 players on Purdue that hit a jump shot. He was one of them. Braden hit
Yes.
the only other. He hit 3 jump shots. Braden Smith did, and Kaufman hit the very first jump shot of the game to score the 2 points where
Yep.
Purdue was leading 2-0. So, but it was a great season, obviously for Purdue. I know that's consolation prize for Purdue fans, but I mean, It was a great season. UConn, though, that's just a train that could not be stopped.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
those now looking back at it, they lost one game since December 20th. I don't know why it wasn't everybody's bracket picking UConn's.
We all were just hoping for a magical tournament.
Yeah. All right, let's go to more fun topics here where we can like look back at what was a great basketball season despite the predictability and some takeaways from the 2024 season. I want to start here though with a conference that only got 3 teams into the tournament, the Big East. All 3 teams in the tournament made the Sweet 16. As we know, UConn won it all. They're snubbed though, Seton Hall. They won the NIT. I think
Yep.
this is a pretty obvious point of the committee doing an absolutely terrible job.
Yep. 100%. And you know what they're going to do to try to hang their hat on? But no, we had it right. I'm going to say something nice because it's against me. They did have Villanova pegged,
Yeah, yeah.
who many people were like, oh, they're a French team. They could have got in. Which one? They had no business being in the tournament. But that is what the committee will hang their hat on. They'll be like, well,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, but like Big East, like Villanova, like we didn't let them in. They lost in the first round of the NIT.
Mhm.
Yeah, sure. You got one shitty team that should never in the conversation, right?
Yeah. I completely agree. And like Marquette and Creighton, like they just kind of ran into terrible matchups at the wrong time. Like
Honestly,
obviously, so like if they were in different spots, they probably would have made it even further too.
I
So
will say they literally had the worst teams possible matchup wise for both of those teams within their brackets.
yeah, definitely. All right. So this season I feel like was more evident than any other just with how huge the transfer portal was. Teams constructed themselves so differently or like, than in the past. We had teams that were
Yeah.
all freshmen. We had teams that were all transfer portal. We had experienced teams like that weren't just mid majors. We had like actual big majors teams that were experienced, and we had a combination. But I want to start first with the freshman teams and just kind of look at how those teams did because that's kind of how like Coach K and Calipari and
Yep.
such have made their dues. That they're obviously unlikely to win the tournament in this. It's pretty obvious. Just watching Duke, we said how soft they looked. Kentucky, how soft they were, but they actually had good seasons, if you want to say. Like they both were 4 seeds. They had top 2 recruiting class, but both fan bases very disappointed. Colorado had their best recruiting class ever. It took a late season run, but it did show you can build around freshmen. But I think this is the
Yeah.
most unlikely way to win a national championship nowadays to build around freshmen.
I don't think you're winning a national title with
No,
just
I don't.
freshmen. The only way that will be possible will be it's going to take a two-pronged effort. You're going to have a generational player on your team because they have to, and two, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a down year in college basketball.
Yeah. I agree. Completely agree. And just some to put some downsides to this, besides like I mean Duke and Kentucky didn't live up to expectations. But even worse, USC was the number 3 recruiting class. Michigan State was the number 5 recruiting class. USC was terrible most of the
Oh
season to the
yeah.
very end, and Michigan State underachieved all season.
Yeah, Michigan State, not to do any spoilers here, they might be the most surprising because I almost would say they had a little bit of a combo.
Yeah,
Like they
that's
had
true.
leadership, they had good guard play, which we always talk about, but then they had the freshman class and they looked like
Yeah.
metrics wise, everyone says they were great. We could tell from the eye test they were terrible all year.
And we could tell that back in November when they were playing in that
Yeah. It
that
took all of one half for us to know they weren't good.
yeah, well, it's like okay, this team's vastly overrated. And then, of course, nowadays you can't do anything without the transfer portal. We had a couple teams or many teams built by this, but many teams went in either a very good or a very bad way. I'll start with Illinois and Washington State were built very well through the transfer
Mm-hmm.
portal. Illinois, obviously, we know how good their stars are. Washington State, not a single person was talking about them in the preseason. And then it took a while for this team, Gonzaga, to really get going. They were ranked high early in the season, but really came on late. And it was basically because their transfers took over with Nimhard being the point guard.
Yeah.
Those were the teams that I really pointed out as having great seasons through the transfer portal.
Yeah. And the more you're saying and the more I'm thinking about it, I actually think that the real key is for freshmen, that is talent. Talent will only get you so far, right? It
Yeah.
will not win you a national title. With the transfers, you kind of know what you're getting. And I think what really the strength is in that is that it comes down to the coach.
Yeah.
Because you're getting the players you know that fit your system. Whereas like when you recruit players, you're not necessarily sure what I mean, you have an idea of what their game is, but a lot of times people get recruited based on potential, not their actual skill set at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of both ways, which then segues into what I'm going to say will be your third one, and I'll let you take that one away.
All right, I'm going to go real quick though with the bad transfer portal teams because these
Okay.
teams need to be called out because these are all top 15 preseason ones that just had disastrous seasons. Kansas, yes, they made the tournament, but we all knew they weren't going anywhere. They went all in the with Dickinson and McCullers. Obviously, injuries played a factor, but then these next two teams, Miami and Arkansas, whew, it couldn't have been worse what their seasons did via the transfer portal.
Here, not here, just foreshadowing, Kyle, since you brought it up, Arkansas. I met the team. There is no team.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, there is no team. They all just wear jerseys that look alike, but they are not together. All right, next one is experienced teams, and I think none is more obvious than Purdue. But there were obviously other teams that were experienced that weren't just in the big conferences. But it was nice to see that we had big conference experienced teams. Some of the good teams I'll let you go into more detail. But I had Purdue, Houston, Marquette, Creighton, Tennessee, North Carolina, and St. Mary's, all teams that brought back a ton of players. And you just don't see that these colleges before NIL. So it's nice to see we are starting to get back a little bit to the old days despite the huge transfer portal.
And I think that right there is what an actual championship team is going to have to be moving forward. Yes, the coach always matters, but it's some of those teams you reference, if you notice, yes, they worked through the transfer portal. Yes, they had senior leadership, but all of them also did have a couple of young guys. But in totality, it was you need experience, you need good guard play, and you need to have NBA talent.
Yeah.
Like that's really the combination, because then you have guys that are not going to panic when they're on the floor against, a guy that's 3 years older than them or whatever the case may be, which would happen with freshmen, right? But then you also have the talent of guys that not to say someone you don't like, Kyle, but Sharp or Shannon, whatever, who can basically get you a basket anytime you need one.
Yeah,
that's having that NBA talent. I think that's really what it comes down to if you're going to win in today's modern age of college basketball.
Yeah. And some bad teams that went the experience route, it's basically teams that we've crushed on the podcast or talked about them not doing well. I had Texas A&M written down, Virginia, and then I even put your boys Villanova down on this.
Oh yeah, Villanova 100%. They were the most senior team in the country. A&M I could go back and forth on. They were just something was missing the whole year with them. I mean, they were injuries, but just they were right there and just couldn't figure it out. But
yeah, as a top 15 team, I had such high expectations for them. I mean, they got in the tournament, they won a game, so good for them. It's not a bad season, but had high expectations. And then Virginia, dead. They're dead to everybody.
Who cares? They don't exist. I don't know who that is.
And then we have the combo teams, and these are teams that basically just perfected the way. It's going to be incredibly hard to do this, and there's going to be very few coaches that are willing to do it. Obviously, if you just look at Shire at Duke, he's not even willing to try this route. He's just going to go with the guys that come back and freshmen. But we have Uconn. Clearly, they were the number 4 recruiting class. They had Castle and Stewart. They also had Spencer transfer in, so we have both recruiting and transfers. And then, of course, they had returnees and Newton, Klingon, and I mean, if you can actually get all that to work and you have the coach that can figure all that out, it's the perfect way to build a team nowadays.
Yeah. It's like I stole your thunder there. That's what I was kind of going for. My bad. You say that. I think one very unique team, Houston, did kind of build a little bit through the portal, not a lot. Had the guys that were there a while, but then they had Shaheed, who was, very talented. They kind of did it. That's a unique situation, I think.
Well, they stole Baylor's best scorer, LJ Cryer.
So I say they kind of did, not as much as the Connecticut as you referenced, but they're an interesting case as well. I think of what you can do, but personally, I don't think they're there on the coaching front. So
yeah. A couple other teams I had for the combo that just kind of stick out to me. Arizona, they had a top, not last year top recruiting class, but in 2022 they did. And they returned 4 guys this season. And they had 3 guys in the transfer portal come in that all played big minutes. Of course, Caleb Love. And then I think Alabama did it the best. They've had outside of UConn, obviously, they've had back-to-back top 15 classes in recruiting. They got Sears to return this season. And then their second and third best scorers, Estrada and Nelson, were transfers. So I think Oates nailed it.
Oates
just didn't have enough to get past UConn. So
math teacher to riches. Nate Oates.
All right, let's look at some preseason rankings versus final rankings. Just kind of feel like, is there any way we can translate this to next year? Because these rankings, we all go off these rankings at the beginning of the season, like, oh, these teams are supposed to be good. Doesn't work out that way. It
Yeah.
certainly does not work out that way. But Duke, Purdue, Marquette, UConn, Creighton, Tennessee, Gonzaga, Arizona. A lot of teams there. All of those teams that were in the top 15 in the preseason, they all finished in the top 15 to end the season. So for I think it's 8 out of the 15, there actually were good teams. Obviously, only 2 of them were title contenders because they only made the title game, but there were 8 out of the 15 that finished both or started in the top 15, finished in the top 15. But knowing this, they're still obviously bust. Who do you think is the biggest bust in your mind of the season?
Arkansas.
Arkansas?
Easily has to be Arkansas. After what they've done the last 4 years, and then if I remember correctly, they were a preseason top 15 team.
Yep. Number
And
14. Preseason
okay, yeah.
number 14.
And just shit the bed in the worst way.
Yeah.
Just terrible.
Well, and it was like it wasn't only bad play on the court; it was bad play off the court. Like it was
So
just
bad.
such a bad.
The Must Bus was broken, and somehow
Yeah.
they were able to tow that thing to LA.
Yeah. And so I wrote down a couple different ones. Arkansas was going to be my pick as well, but I'll give out some of my other ones. Kansas number 1 to number 19. They didn't live up to it at all.
Yeah.
Michigan State number 4 to unranked most of the season. Obviously a letdown. Obviously those 2 teams made the tournament, so they can't be the biggest bust. But if I had to have one rival Arkansas, I'll go with Miami because they also finished under 500 and they were ranked 1 spot above Arkansas in the preseason.
If you really think about it, though, we really shouldn't be surprised. Like, I think that what this year was finally making it legitimate what the NIL and all these transfer era is going to be. Like, I was pretty much out on Hunter Dickinson after he screwed me like 2 years ago.
Mhm.
I didn't think he was going to be, I thought he'd be fine at Kansas, but I knew I'm going to put him over the top. McCullough transferred out of Texas Tech for a reason. Yes, he's a good scorer, but we knew he wasn't really necessarily an NBA talent. You go to Miami, they lose their best player and kind of had their magical run. They probably were overrated from the beginning. You go down the line with a couple of those other teams. I think next year, Kyle, we're going to just ping it right on the head because we know who the good programs are. We know who the wannabes are. We got this.
And speaking of stealing thunder, I had one thing that wasn't a team that was the biggest bust, and it was a combo thing here. It was Philip Kowski and Hunter Dickinson.
Oh my gosh. Talk about just the worst.
They were number 2 and 3 in Player of the Year preseason odds, and my God, did they let us down?
Yeah, I remember us having this conversation like, who actually has a chance to compete with Edie? Pretty sure we both said, flip me off. And like, just couldn't have been more wrong.
Yeah, I completely agree. Completely agree. All right, so since we went from bust, what was the team that surprised you the most? I have 3 written down, but I'm interested to see what you have here.
Okay, I'm going to give you 2. One, Creighton.
Okay.
We think about how good they would have been if those 2 guys don't transfer to Kansas State.
I know, right?
The other one, Texas Tech. My gun's up.
Okay.
Like, we talked about this, okay? So one of the starters on Houston and then McCullough both come from Texas Tech. If those 2 guys are on Texas Tech is a top 10 team. They still did really well for really having no expectations. Had some big wins. They played in maybe the toughest conference, arguably. Pretty impressed that they were able to crack really the top 20 for most of the year and had a decent finish to the regular season. Tournament, not as great as we had hoped, but there wasn't a lot of expectation there in the first place.
Well, they ran into a Final Four team in the first shot. I mean, come on.
Okay, good point.
Yeah. All right, I got 3, so bear with me here because I did write down a few stats for you. Going to start with our boys, our podcast team, Indiana State. In week 15, they got up to number 23. They were 22 and 3, including their run to the NIT championship. They won 32 games. Only 2 teams won more than 32 games this season. We watched them on Monday. It was Uconn and Purdue. So a hell of a season from Indiana State, and they won't be having it again. So we need to talk about them as much as possible because their coach and their top 8 players are leaving.
Yeah, not great for them.
Yeah. Next one, I already mentioned them once, Washington State. No one, including myself, even talked about them until February, basically. They weren't even talked about in the top 25 or the Pac-12 in the preseason. Didn't win either title, so that kind of brings them back a little bit. But they did go 23-9 and were a top 25 team most of February and March. And for Washington State, that's a huge win for them.
Especially because they have no conference next year.
Yeah. Good luck getting relevant that way. And then the team I voted for the most surprising out of every team is Iowa State. They didn't
Oh,
have they didn't have a single vote in the preseason top 25. They make the Sweet 16. They win the Big 12 tournament title. They got all the way up to number 6 as their highest ranking. And my rankings, they got all the way up to number 4. They finished the season at number 8, and they were just 4 bad minutes in the first half away from beating Illinois. So I think Iowa State most surprising team just based on the expectations.
shame on both of us, Kyle.
Yeah,
University of
definitely.
South Florida. University of South
Oh
Florida. How do we not
no,
get them?
no.
The Bulls, man.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about our boys that weren't my boys at the beginning of the season.
Literally projected. Were they not projected to finish dead last?
Uh-huh. Yep.
That's
Yeah.
insane. Shame on us both for not thinking about that.
Oh man, but what a season. And I always we haven't had any of our podcast team ever make a championship during our podcast. So that championship Monday is kind of like a downer to me because I know it's like the next podcast kind of stinks, but it's nice to like look back at the season, and since we watch every single night, just kind of enjoy what we
Yeah.
watched for the last 5 months.
Yeah. And you say that, Kyle, and I'm sure we're gonna move into it. If we don't have a team in the championship game next year that is a pod team,
Yeah.
one of us might cry ourselves to
Yeah.
sleep.
I definitely feel you on that one. All right, so what's to come? Real quick, we only have about 7 minutes left in the podcast,
Yep.
so we'll go through this quick. But we can't go this podcast, can't leave you guys hanging on the off season without talking about Calipari. Calipari to Arkansas. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I made the joke. He said it in his press conference. He met the team. There is no team. There's really only one guy on the roster.
Yeah.
One guy on his roster. He's not a portal guy. That's kind of what killed him at Arkansas. Unless he's magically convincing every kid that was going to go to Kentucky to now come to Arkansas, he's dead in the water.
Yeah.
Makes total sense if he's going to dive into this whole NIL thing because no school has bigger pockets than Arkansas.
Yeah.
So kudos to him. I have not yet decided if I'm going to be a Calipari guy now, though.
Okay. Yeah, you have to decide that because it's must bust teams.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think I can do must bust at USC. I think that goes against everything in me with being a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
Like I just can't.
Yeah. And I will say Kentucky has the third best recruiting class, and I assume all those guys are going to decommit from Kentucky. So we'll be interested to see who goes to Arkansas with them.
I think it's going to depend who's the coach there.
Yeah.
Yeah, already on record. It's already on record. Hurley's not going. My pick, Drew, is not going. Yeah. Billy Donovan's the next target. He hasn't said no, but he definitely has said he's not interested. So be a real shame if he had to turn them down for the third time in the last 15 years.
And I will say, I listen to a lot of Chicago radio, and everybody's reporting that Donovan's not going anywhere. So I don't know who is next there. So
I don't see the reason for him to go.
No,
it makes no sense at this point.
And he just got a contract extension from the Bulls last year. So it's I don't know. I wouldn't do it if I was him. I wouldn't want to coach.
They need to get Dana Altman from Oregon. I think that's what they need to do. They won't, but he's probably one of the best coaches in the country left. I keep seeing Sean Miller. For God's sake, Blue Nation, do not get Sean Miller.
Yeah, no.
That'd be the worst move in the world.
Yeah. I'm just going to put this out there because I did have who will replace Cal. I don't really have a good suggestion, so I just want this to happen because it'll be great for the podcast next year. I want Rick Pitino.
Yes, thank you, Kyle. I was waiting to see what you thought. I said it to my wife. She didn't actually know that Rick Pitino used to coach the Wildcats.
Yeah.
I think he has on record that his only regret in life was leaving Kentucky. Bring Pitino back. Bring him back.
It would be great. He was literally canceled 5 years ago, and then he gets maybe the best job in college basketball. It'd be wonderful. All right, we've talked about this before. The transfer portal. We are now up to over 1,500 players in the transfer portal. It's expected to hit over 2,000 players in the transfer portal. Do you like this, or is it just annoying as hell watching all this?
I'm going to say I'm mildly annoyed that everyone does it, but I don't necessarily hate it either.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm undecided. I'm going to leave it there.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't like the guys that go into the transfer portal but also declare for the NBA. It's like you're just going to transfer. You're not going to the NBA. Like if you have to put yourself in the transfer portal but think about the NBA, you're probably not good enough to go to the NBA.
Yeah, I probably get more annoyed with big time players going to transfer portal or guys that are on big rosters. Like if you're the 7th guy on Duke, why are you in the transfer portal? You're on Duke. You're probably going to play at some point. Stay there.
Or
If
if
you're
you're,
the number 3 guy at South Florida, yeah, you probably should
yeah,
transfer to somewhere way better. That makes
yeah.
sense.
Or if you're Mark Mitchell and you've started for the last 2 years at Duke and you play a pivotal role and now you're going into the transfer portal, it's kind of lame.
That's
So,
dumb. Dumb.
yeah.
So,
And then I have to talk about this real quick. Conference realignment. Just a real quick thought as a fan, how do you think this is going to affect? Because I feel like this was the last national championship that will be normal. I feel like the rest of this time with now the conference realignments,
yeah,
everything's going to be a lot different.
I'm going to be really confused. Just going to
Mm-hmm.
say it that way. Football, I can figure it out. It's been going, that's like the biggest talk. Basketball, they've not really said anything about it. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
confused. Why is
Yeah.
Texas playing Alabama on December 13th? I didn't think we were
Yeah.
doing non-conference.
Yeah.
I'm going to be so confused.
And if you thought so many people complained on Monday about the 9:20 Eastern start for the title
Oh
game,
my
just
God.
wait till Purdue plays at at USC at
USC.
11 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday. It's going to be a disaster. Like, that's the part I'm not looking forward to. It's just these random games that it's like, what in the world do we have Ohio State playing at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night?
Yeah. You know what I'm going to miss? Getting to hit everyone with our like once a year midnight snack in the pack.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen again.
No, no. All right. Last but not least, we have 2 minutes, 50 seconds left. It's going to be very difficult to predict because we don't even know the rosters of any of these teams,
Yep.
but we do have odds. If you got your gun to head, who do you think is going to win? I'll give you a second to think on it. Give some top odds to the people that are listening. Right now, Uconn and Duke are tied at plus 1,000 to win the title next year. Kansas and Houston at plus 1,400. Bama and a lot of other teams at plus 1,600. And some other notables, Purdue plus 3,000. Michigan State plus 4,000. And for those of you that are IU Hoosier fans, you're plus 12,000, which is the same as Louisville. And Louisville is one of the worst teams I watched all season. So just want to say that out loud. But who, gun to the head, if you had to pick today, national title?
You can't go against Danny Hurley. Can't do it. Taking UConn, gun to my head, taking that. However, Cooper Flagg's as good as he said he is. Duke, which if he's a smart man, he should flip the UConn.
I've been hearing a lot of that too.
I mean, he looks a lot less hateable in a UConn jersey.
Well, I'm going into this saying right now on it's technically April 11th, but you're going to be listening to this on April 12th. I will not be picking Duke to win anything on the podcast next year because that did not work out this year. And so I will also go with UConn. I will take the long shot on the team I actually hate, Michigan State, though, because they do return basically their entire squad. I don't think anybody's leaving. Nobody as of today has reached the portal. I think they'll be dangerous next year. So those are the two teams, if I had to, which I will not be placing a bet on right now because I need to know the rosters of these teams. But those are my two teams.
All right, here you go. I guess I thought of this too. Put it on your board now. When the season starts, ask me this question. Have I put a future in on USC to make the Sweet 16? Because Musselman has done it every fucking time he leaves.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, that's a good point. All right, guys. Again, this is our last podcast of the season. We don't really have a schedule for the next podcast, so just continue to follow us on Twitter. He's at Mingo Made 1. I'm at Kyle Cliffy. We'll do probably some random ones throughout the off season. We'll be putting out other content as well. We do bet on other sports too, so you can follow us on Twitter. We will have those bets. But thank you so much for listening all season. We really appreciate it. We had our most views probably ever this season. It was awesome. A lot of participation, a lot of feedback. We greatly appreciate it, and we'll see you next college basketball season.
Love you guys.